I got a question about you, mortician.
You bang the dead bodies?
No.
Alright, so try not to judge the video too harshly off the title, which is probably something ridiculous like the Dung Eater is misunderstood, or in defense of the Dung Eater like some people have made videos about. Here at The Honored Madman Incorporated, we're going to talk about what exactly the Dung Eater does to his victims. We're not going to really defend him at all, we're just going to explain what he does and let you decide. The Loathesome Dung Eater is a tarnished criminal who at one point served time with everybody's favorite shellfish enthusiast, Boggart. During their time in prison together, the Dung Eater reportedly terrified the shellfish connoisseur with his sheer terror and sadism. It's possible that the fetid goo gobbler here was originally the resident of a forgotten place called the Sun Realm that has long since faded away, and that's mainly just me judging his medallion. However, the description of the armor mentions that it's supposed to represent the guidance of grace and the Elden Ring itself. It's more or less common knowledge what the Dung Eater does to his victims on the surface level. He kills people and then proceeds to do messed up stuff with the corpse, so messed up in fact that they are defiled to their very soul, and are unable to return to the Erd Tree upon death, to be reborn again because of the messed up system that America had set in place, by sealing away destined death. These spirits are now considered cursed and are turned into wraiths, as there is more than one item description that refers to wraiths as being the spirits of people who died while cursed, where there's stuff like rancors that are actually the spirits of people that were burned in the ghost flame. Both are vengeful spirits but have very different origins. Wraiths are mainly used as weapons by the aptly named Wraith Callers who use bells to summon them, which seems to work in a manner similar to the spirit calling bell, except it summons or calls wraiths. Wraiths are also known to live within the bodies of hulking cursed beings known as omens. A lot of beings have it rough in the lands between, like the misbegotten, the demi-humans, any kind of short people, anybody who enjoys the undead. But it's a whole different ballpark for the omen. Born with painful looking horns that sometimes pop right out of their eyes, and if they happen to be of common birth, which I imagine was most of them, their horns are excised and made into weapons for omen killers. Omen killers hunt down any kind of rogue omen and probably do the severing of the horns themselves. They also wear Hanya-like masks to mock the omens, as these poor fuckers are cursed to have nightmares haunted by these beings known as elders, which I imagine look somewhat like demons. The nightmares themselves could have something to do with all the wraiths that appear to live within inside each omen. And since these poor fuckers are both born cursed and die cursed, it's safe to assume that their spirits also become wraiths when they die, and obviously don't return to the Erd Tree, as it appears that the Erd Tree wants nothing to do with things that may or may not be from a previous age. Same goes with the misbegotten. And like these winged disgusting creatures, the misbegotten, the omen are also used as sort of like soldier slaves. It appears they're used in a manner similar to how the ogres in Lord of the Rings are used by the orcs. And because of their cursed nature, they're only given weapons that could be taken away easily by, this weird disintegrating malediction that was put on it, if they were ever to go rogue. And it's worth noting that they're referred to as cursed only because the Golden Order in Greater Will says that they're cursed. The omen that survive having their horns cut off and the regal ones appear to fashion these memorial dolls for their fallen kin in the form of the Omen Baron and the Regal Omen Baron. The Omen curse itself was not created by the Dung Eater. He is just capable of spreading it by doing funny stuff to corpses before he murders them. The quote-unquote curse seems to originate further back than the time of the Erd Tree, back in the days of the Crucible of Life and the Great Tree. Back when all life was said to be blended, and when a being that didn't typically bear a horn bared a horn, it was seen as a mark of the divine. Now, I think that it's safe to assume that the divine that it's referring to is the regal ancestor spirit, a being that is worshipped by minotaurs and exists beyond the purview of the Erd Tree. It could be referring to all of the ghostly deer bosses. I'm just using the regal one as an example. But the word life is used to refer to their horns, and it says life sprouts from death as it does from birth. And to me, horns at birth sounds like the Omen. And the horns they bear seem to look a bit like, well, look at the Crucible Knight tree armor, as well as Siluria's spear. They look very similar to those root-like things on those. But I suppose it's common knowledge that the original curse of the Omen comes from the Crucible of Life. But what it comes down to is that some beings are unfortunately born with horns, where in another age they would be seen as a sign of the divine. They're instead considered cursed and usually killed at birth. And their spirits are unable to return to the Erdtree because the Erdtree doesn't want them. It doesn't want any sign from the previous age being absorbed. Now back to the Dung Eater. When he kills somebody and does weird shit to the body, he spreads this Omen curse, due to him defiling them to the point where their spirit is now cursed. It's unknown why the Dung Eater hates the Greater Will and the gods so much. His armor says he has the heart of an Omen without the body to match. Now that could just mean that he was born cursed but never sprouted any horns, because of his tarnished status perhaps? It's tough to say. It could also mean that someone he loved or someone close to him was born cursed, like an Omen, and were killed. Maybe a baby infant, maybe his own son. That would make him a little too sympathetic in my opinion though. But honestly, who knows with this game and its NPCs. But as far as I can tell, the Dung Eater is not a good guy. It's not like any character is wholly good or bad, but the Dung Eater is a murderer and a sadist and appears to get off to what he does. At the end of the day, he's just as bad as fanatics like D, the Hunter of the Dead. Just the other side of the coin, where someone like D has all this fanatical love for the gods, the Dung Eater has a fanatical hatred of them. And despite the Dung Eater's actions being pretty abhorrent, it results in a pretty good ending. I mean, sure, it probably turns him into some kind of patron saint for all the Omen, but it results in a truly equal world, where the curse is no longer a curse because everybody has it. It's basically as close of an ending as you can get to the way things were before the Age of the Erdtree, which was during the age of the primordial Crucible of Life and the Great Tree. This is further reinforced by how the Erdtree looks in this ending. It looks like it's been drained of all life, because now it's unable to siphon off the souls of the dead because they're all cursed. It doesn't want any of them, and it's just this parasite tree is slowly dying. I know a lot of people disagreed with Vadi when he called it a parasite, but it might not be a sentient parasite, but the thing controlling it is sort of using it as like this parasite to draw energy for itself. It's using it as like a siphon.
Alright, barrel number 6 is done, dude!
Mac, this doesn't seem to be the best. No.
Siphoning energy from the lands between and taking it to wherever the fuck the Greater Will is. And sure, you could argue that the Dung Eater using horrific methods to achieve a good ending, whether he wanted to or not, is a little better or even worse than what the Greater Will did, which was to achieve power and produce a potentially better world than the one that preceded it. I mean, that's up for debate. We don't really know what it was like during the primordial crucible. However, that supposedly better world came at the cost of an unknown alien entity siphoning souls and energy from the lands, that also has a bunch of insane religious fanatics that carry out its will. One point I wanted to go back on is that it's sort of unknown whether or not the Dung Eater knows what he's doing is actually freeing these spirits from the grasp of the Elden Beast and the Greater Will and all that. He seems to just be doing it out of hatred and just wants to keep spreading the curse so that in the end there won't be any curse anymore if everybody's cursed. They'll just be blessings like they used to be in the days of old. And when it comes to his exact motives, it's tough to say. I mean, all we know about the Dung Eater is that he did time with Boggart, was executed and covered in shit for his crimes, only to be reborn and called back to the lands between, where he was again imprisoned for committing grisly murders, before the player frees him and he tells them, "I will kill again," and sure enough, he kills the newly relocated Boggart, who is also cursed and defiled and leaves a seedbed curse behind. He then invades the player screaming, referring of course to his sword, which is made from the spine of a malformed giant that was either named Milos or the Dung Eater's name is Milos. I like to think of the Dung Eater as a man with no name type character though. But after you defeat him here, you can meet up with him back at the sewers and he sort of passes the Dung Eater mantle on to you. saying no one's ever resisted his curse before or defeated him, and that you must be the Dung Eater, and that he needs to be cursed. Interestingly enough, despite being an Omen fanboy, the Dung Eater can be summoned for the Mog the Omen boss fight underneath the sewers. And also, as I previously discussed in another video, the Dung Eater can also be turned into a puppet, and in my opinion, he's probably my favorite puppet besides the Omen Killer Rollo one. He doesn't do a whole lot of damage like the Black Knife one, but he's extremely durable. Like, he's probably, in my opinion, the most durable and hardy of the spirit summons. On one of my new game runs, I pretty much tried to see if he could solo any of the bosses, and he can solo a good amount of them, but after a while he starts being completely incapable of defeating them. I mean, he'll last a while, he'll definitely hold his own against them, but he doesn't do enough damage to actually bring the stronger bosses down. Just something that I wanted to mention because I really like how From Software allowed us to turn him into a puppet, and it also made him a pretty useful one. Personally, I think it's possible that the Dung Eater just does what he does to make all of the years he spent suffering worth something. I mean, if he can get revenge on the very gods themselves, then all those years he spent shunned and covered in shit and all that won't be worthless. They weren't all for nothing. I may be reading a little too much into it, but I think it's a big possibility. There isn't much more for me to say about the Dung Eater right now. I mean, if you kill him early on, he won't kill Boggart, so that's pretty good. Although it keeps you from getting his ending. But I just want to do this quick little video to talk about what the Dung Eater does to the corpses and the whole nature of the curse and all that. And, well, I hope you guys found the video informative, and if you liked it, please consider liking it. If you disliked it, please dislike it. And if you like hearing me talk about Elden Ring lore or other things, please consider subscribing. That would really help me out, and I would appreciate it a lot. My next video will either be about Ranny, Magma Worms, or Millicent. I'm working on a Remembrance boss video also, but that one might be like an hour long, so it might take a little longer to finish. But yeah, currently working on a lot of stuff, so without further ado, I will say goodbye to y'all and have a good day. See ya.
Curse you, Golden Order. One day, you'll get what's coming.